That's me.
Oh,
Okay, read the Jewish question and we'll debate that.
Iron Man.
Good luck. Thank you.
Tony Stark, Iron
It's a
Man.
great book.
I'm not anti-Semitic, okay? But what I'm going to
Anybody that opens with that scares me.
but
I don't hate black people,
but what I'm gonna say may have the surface appearance of sounding anti-Semitic, okay? Right. You've just defined what Jewish is. I heard you say, and I was going to come in on this. Sorry. You said you're Jewish if your mother is Jewish, or by faith.
Or by conversion, yeah.
Or by conversion,
So it's
okay?
either ethnic or religious.
Okay, now this is your definition, yeah?
No, it's the Jewish definition.
Fine, okay. It is what I apparently should take on board as being the official definition.
The historical definition.
Okay, that's the historical definition. Now, I put it to you in the nicest possible terms. That definition is detrimental to constructive discussion for a very, very simple reason, okay? Because I think the word Jewish is then being used to mean two things simultaneously. And it's, forget the word Jewish. You don't want any word that means two things simultaneously where one of them is something I can't change, like my skin color or my sex, and the other is a thing that I choose.
Faith, yeah.
Yeah, faith, or politics or whatever, yeah? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you have a belief, it's fair enough for me to criticize it constructively and you need to hear it. But it's not cool for me to criticize you on something you can't change that you were born with, be it your blood, your sex, or whatever. And using the word Jewish to mean both of these things just clouds all of these debates about anti-Semitism. Do you take my point?
It's a very, very simple answer.
Yeah.
So you're coming at this debate because you were born in, I assume, a Christian nation. And your concept of religion and nationhood is steeped in Western Occidental thinking.
Really?
So the Jewish people, there was no biblical word in Hebrew for religion. What we consider ourselves is a nation. Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. We are a nation which has a constitution, which is the Torah, the Old Testament. In the same way that you have Native American tribes that will have ancestral religions, but they're a tribe, they're a people. So too are we. So when somebody moves to Britain, the British people, the British government can determine its immigration policy. It can say, you are welcome to join this people. We grant you citizenship. Mazel tov, you're British. The Jewish people, so too, have a similar peoplehood. And people can join. Yeah, we have a sense of people kind. Yeah. People. We're a people. We are a people. We are a people with a nation, which is the land of Israel. We are the people of Israel, and we have the religion of Israel. And so if you want to join that people, historically, the way you did it was by converting to Judaism. Irrespective of your belief system, if you were born into that people, you are ethnically Jewish, and if your mother is Jewish, not your father, if your mother is Jewish, we consider you part of the people, irrespective of what you believe.
I got that.
And so what I'm saying to you is you're viewing us like a religion. We don't see ourselves as a religion. We see ourselves as a people who follow the Torah and who follow the Talmud, which is
That's a
the
religion
Jewish.
to me.
That's, no, sorry, okay, may I? No, not everybody who is of Jewish blood will have Jewish faith. Or any particular, I don't mean that in an inflammatory sense. Pick what term I should use, okay? DNA? What do you want? What term should I use?
DNA?
What, yeah.
There's Jewish DNA, is it?
Oh, I don't know. I need genealogy. Genealogy, is that okay? Biology?
That's what he's just speaking about.
Yeah?
It's, tradition of descent.
Okay, descent. Just because you're of Jewish descent, that comes hardwired. You don't get to choose it. But you do get to choose your faith, yeah? I'm just making that distinction. Do you not accept that's a valid distinction for any...
So I assume you're English. It's an assumption. You can tell me no, you're not. Yeah. You were born here. You don't have a choice in where you're born, yeah? Right. You could move to China and you would still remain an Englishman, irrespective of your belief system, yeah? At some point, your ancestors came to this land, yeah? If your ancestors came more recently, they would have been accepted by the nation and naturalized, yeah? Irrespective of what values you hold, you can be a communist, you can be whatever, but you're still an Englishman. Yeah? Irrespective of what, it's the same with Judaism or with the Jewish people. Judaism isn't a Hebrew word. We don't use it. We call ourselves a people. Yeah. And so you're saying it's dangerous because you're a religion and you're an ethnic group. And we're saying...
I'm saying the word. Forget you. It's not a personal discussion. It's saying it's bad conversationally. In order to break down constructive conversation, it's best to define your terms. This word is being used to mean two things at once. It will naturally create confusion in debate. All I'm really suggesting is, could we have two words to mean whether you are Jewish by belief, in which case I do assert my right to debate the merits of your belief, or whether you're Jewish by genealogy,
So-
in which case you're sacrosanct.
So
and
so
anyone who takes
we
the
we
Bible
have
is
that
on your
we
side.
have that already.
You can't. I don't,
No, no,
you
we have
can't
that already. No,
make
we have that already. So when people talk about anti-Semitism, which is really where this conversation's coming from, that is a prejudice against the Jewish people. No, listen. I listen to you. I listen to you. Do me the courtesy of listening to me. Anti-Semitism, as it's commonly understood, is a prejudice against the Jewish people. Judaism is a religion and open to criticism. If Pavlov wants to say that circumcision is a primitive practice and he doesn't think it should be practiced in Western nations, that is a legitimate criticism of a religion because it's an idea. If he were to say that the Jewish people, they are a disgusting people and they should be whatever, that's problematic because the focus is on the ethnicity. So we that word already exists. That word already exists and it's Judaism.
How would I express to you that I thought, and I don't think this, but if I did think that the Jewish religion was fairly abhorrent, if I held that view, which I think I'm entitled to without being racist, because it's not a racist observation, how would I express that without being accused of being anti-Semitic?
Very simply, have you heard of Christopher Hitchens?
Yeah.
He does it all of the time, and nobody calls him. He did it all of the time,
So I have to
and no.
become Christopher Hitchens?
Yeah, of course. No, what you do is you separate the religion from the people, and you look at a practice that you're opposed to. You say that I don't think that kosher slaughter is an ethical way to kill an animal. Nobody's going to say you're an anti-Semite. We may have a debate about whether it is or it isn't, or which values should take precedent, your animal rights values or my religious values. But you can criticize a religion. Nobody's saying you can't criticize Judaism.
So I can criticize a religion, good, thank you. And I can criticize politics, yes. I can criticize a political policy because it's a choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay, because what I would like is the ability to criticize what's going on in Israel and Gaza in a way where I will not instantly get drowned down on the basis that I'm being anti-Semitic. Because although there will be anti-Semitic people who argue that will be their motive. It's a bandwagon they'll jump on. It doesn't mean that everyone who's arguing that point is anti-Semitic, and I'm not. Okay?
Israel and Palestine is one of the most debated political conflicts in the world at the moment. No one is stopping you debating Israel-Palestine. You can't turn on a television station without listening to a debate about Israel and Palestine. I wish they didn't. And this,
I just said I don't want to be accused of being
so
anti-Semitic.
I'm not accusing you. I don't think anyone is.
I didn't say you did.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm expressing my emotional feeling, and I'd like to know that I can have the
So
space
what I would
to
say.
discuss Israel and Palestine in a way where every 5 minutes the low blow of you're anti-Semitic won't jump into the debate.
So I will also add into that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that accusation comes up a lot, and then I'll ask you, I know you want to ask a question. One of the reasons that comes up is there is exceptionalism. If you look at the conflicts around the world, there are horrific conflicts. More people get killed by lightning in Israel and Palestine than the conflict there. In 1 year, you'll have more people killed in Syria than 100 years of fighting between Israelis and Palestinians on both sides, including all the invading armies that come in there from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and all these other nations. So what I'm saying is that if you have a disproportionate focus on Israel, yes, maybe some people will question why you single out the Jewish state over all these other bloody conflicts.
Fair enough. So
And
double check my compass, and my motive is nothing to do with having a problem with people of Jewish genealogy. Nothing at all. I have legitimate concerns about the political history and the political setup, and I may be wrong, and I need to learn more.
And we can have a
Or
talk
I
about
might
that.
be right, and other people need to learn more. But what I don't want to do is waste time being accused constantly of
But-
being bigot, because it's boring.
But what I would say, who's accused you personally?
Nothing. You will get it enough here, and I think you'll find just the notion that if somebody, for example, criticised the Rothschilds here, there seemed to be a jump that means you're attacking Jewish people. Now, it's possible that you're attacking the Rothschilds because you're anti-Semitic, that's true, but it's possible for me to attack the Rothschilds without that being the case. And I'd hope that before someone dived in against me, they might give me the benefit of the doubt, or, just not close the door on me.
Okay, so the Rothschilds is a great example.
Okay.
So there's a belief that Jews control global finance. The family which is most commonly given.
You're next. He's next.
Okay. Basically, the reason people get offended by that, or sensitive to that accusation, is it has led to the deaths of many Jews. The Nazis used the Rothschild line.
I'm not a
And
fan of the
No, I'm not saying you are.
I know you're not saying that.
Okay, I'm saying that the reason Jews are sensitive to people who propagate lies about the Rothschilds don't control the world. They were once a very powerful banking family.
Yeah.
Now they barely register. Global corporations are far, far more influential and affluent. They don't index at all. Even if you combine all the wealth together of all the Rothschilds, they have nothing to do with each other. They're completely disconnected now. And so the reason Jews get sensitive to this is because it's a lie that was used in Nazi Germany to justify the rounding up of our people.
I get that, but I also need to be able to criticize the Rothschilds. If tomorrow they do something despicable, I want to be able to criticize them without having the Holocaust automatically enter the conversation.
But one of the things that comes up, and it's starting to happen now, you're going through all of these examples of things you'd like to be able to do. Oh, I'd like to be able to criticize the religion. I'd like to be able to criticize Israel. I'd like to be able to criticize the Rothschilds. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The Jesuits. Tell me something about the Jesuits and their influence in the world.
Not much up on the Jesuits.
But you are on the Jews.
Ergo, I'm what? Anti-Semitic? Maybe I'm just a bit thick and I don't know much. That's why I don't know about the Jesuits. Look, we want a level platform for all nations and all faiths. Yeah, this isn't ultimately about Jewish or Israel or anything. I just want to know that I can criticize any nation or any faith equally, and that there will be the same international laws for everybody, and then we have equality, and whatever decisions we make have to be equal for all nations and all people. That's all.
What can't you say?
I feel that we are, as you said, I feel I'm treading on eggshells more if I talk about Israel because of the history, and I honestly believe that people who consider themselves to be of Jewish descent, some of them are oversensitive, probably understandably, to the fact that, hang on, is that person starting down the slippery slope? Because when the slippery slope last happened, it was bloody awful. But maybe it's becoming counterproductive for some people who consider themselves to be Jewish to be so triggered instantaneously when it's not appropriate.
So this is the problem I have with this conversation.
Yeah.
Whenever there is a conflict in Israel, tens of thousands of people come out onto the streets in the UK and protest against it. They don't do that for Syria, where 500,000 people are killed. They did do that for Iraq. They did do that for Iraq.
They didn't do that for Ukraine.
They didn't do that for the Ukraine. They only do it for Israel. And so you say that you can't say all of these things.
No,
and I say
that.
BS. People criticize Israel all of the time. It is the most criticized state in the world.
Then I'm expressing myself. We don't need the mic. Sorry, it's not. It's not that it's not so much that I can't say it. It's that I don't think we're getting a good quality of constructive debate when we do it.
but debate.
There's a lot of noise, but I don't think clearly the impasse for the last 60 years in the Middle East, for example, shows the debate could be better.
What can't you say?
It's almost not what you can't. It's partially what you can't say. It's more what won't be heard when you said it.
So what
Yeah.
won't be heard when you said it?
I suspect that certain people, I'm saying it now, who consider themselves Jewish, are too triggered by the possibility of anti-Semitism sometimes when decent points are being made about the Middle East.
So which point?
Yeah. Points about who threw the first punch in 1948.
No, you can. There's been entire books written about that.
I know there have, but okay, my feeling is that, for example, Jeremy Corbyn now being hit with all this anti-Semitic thing.
Because he's a vile anti-Semite.
Okay, there we go. He's a vile anti-Semite. Now, I may be wrong, but everything in my gut tells me the guy's got a history of being non-racist because he understands.
No, he hasn't.
Okay, he says it.
He says my mum fought at Cable Street, therefore I can't be racist.
His general history seems to be that he's been against.
Fought at Cable Street. What? She fought the black shirt.
His history seems to be that he's been against racist organisations. It seems to be. Yeah. And the idea that actually he's been a rabid racist all along.
Can I fact check you there?
Yeah.
So Hamas and Hezbollah are notorious for their anti-Semitism. He called them friends, yeah? He called them his friends. And he said his reason for calling these terror organizations that kill Jews and Muslims around the world, he said his reason for calling them friends was we need dialogue. Donald Trump comes to the UK, state visits announced. He says, I refuse to sit down with Donald Trump. So wait a minute, you believe we should have dialogue with terrorists that want to kill Jews, but we can't sit down with the head of a democratic state. And so the reason I'm bringing this up, he lays a wreath on a terrorist's grave in Algeria. 2 minutes, I'll just finish and then you can come back to it. He went on, there was an anti-Semitic mural painted in Brick Lane which depicted the workers of the world with a monopoly board on their back and some rich Jewish bankers who the artist himself admitted were the Rothschilds, to bring it back. I've forgotten the other families that he said there were, but he named a few families who they were depicted in this mural. Jeremy Corbyn endorsed this mural and said it was a shame that it was being taken down. There are numerous instances where Jeremy Corbyn has sided, he defended Ra'id Saleh, who believes that the Jews, who propagates the lie in the Middle East, that the Jews drink the blood of Christians at Passover. And so all of these things make the Jews question, actually, is Jeremy Corbyn an anti-racist?
Do they though? Drink the blood of
It doesn't taste nice, no. We prefer Muslim.
If I may add, there was a documentary
Christian blood tastes good,
about
apparently.
anti-Semitism, where these political groups, they were in these political groups, and I can't remember what channel it was, but it was shown clearly that some people are labeled anti-Semites very easily if they criticize Israel.
Okay, if you remember the television show, I can watch it and we can have a conversation about it, but there's not enough information for me to respond.
I'll go on quickly. What you just said brings me back to my original point. You said Hamas, and they want to kill the Jews.
Yeah.
And I think that is exactly where the term Jewish becomes unconstructive. Because, and this may sound controversial, but I'm sorry, I'm not saying I support Hamas, but I think it's not impossible that you might want. It would be absolutely indefensible if Hamas want to kill people because they're of Jewish descent. No way is that acceptable.
That's what the charter says.
Okay, then their charter's wrong and I'm against it.
Okay, fine, you're against Hamas, 100%, that's okay.
Assuming they're using the word Jewish in that sense.
They quote a
However,
hadith. They quote a hadith which says, "O Muslim, there's a rock that says, "O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him."
Right.
They talk about Jewish Freemasonry and its global dominance.
I get it. What I mean is, if I ask
That's in their
Hamas, do
definitional
you mean
charter.
people who are genealogically Jewish, and they say yes,
that's what they mean.
Then I'm against them. Okay.
That's what
However,
they mean.
if
It's okay if it's religious Jews, then you can kill them.
Well,
What's your point?
No, I'm not saying kill, but I can have a discussion about the merits of their politics or their faith without being racist. Now, killing is the extreme end of a disagreement.
Sorry,
the notion
can we
of disagreeing
remove
with the
hypothetical
Jews.
wonderland?
Hamas is a bad
Can we
example.
leave hypothetical wonderland?
Why is that hypothetical wonderland?
Hamas's charter
Yes.
explicitly states it's a religious obligation to murder Jews.
I know.
That
What
Jews
do they
dominate
mean
global
by
finance.
the word
They mean the
Jew?
Jewish people.
No, and we've already established that means two things at once.
They quote the hadith that talks about the Jews. At the end of time, there's going to be a battle.
But how can they impose that on Muslims?
Huh?
Not impose that on Muslims. This is
Maybe
what
they're
this
not.
is what Muslims
I want a
believe.
way of
This
saying
is
I
what
have an issue
Hamas
with you.
believe.
Hamas?
Yeah. I'm not talking about Muslims.
Yeah.
Most Muslims don't want to kill Jews. Okay. Most Muslims, I have hummus and baklava with, and we have good relations. Yeah.
I need a way of saying I need to go to war with you because of your beliefs.
Yeah.
But I will not go to war with you because of your genealogy. I need a way of expressing that without instantly being shut down.
Sorry, can we leave this? Hamas explicitly state they want
Jewish.
to. Listen. Hamas explicitly state they want to murder us. Jeremy Corbyn calls them his friends. That's what we're discussing. Yes, if you want, you can criticise the religion, and that exists. You can criticise Judaism. You can criticise Israeli politics. By the way, 20% of Israelis aren't Jewish. Yeah, so you're conflating the Jewish state.
Well, that means 80% are. Yeah, that's quite a lot.
It's far more diverse than this nation.
I get that, but it's 80%.
No, stop,
and
stop,
as you said,
stop,
you think of yourselves as being a collective culture.
Stop, listen.
Why stop?
Because you're saying that Israel and Jewish are synonymous.
No, I'm saying there's a danger of people thinking Israel and Jewish is synonymous.
Who's thinking that? Is
it
anyone
me?
here?
Me.
Well, that's your problem, sir.
Well, maybe it's not just my problem.
Okay, does anyone here think that the state of Israel and Jewish is the same thing?
I think there's there's a
If
demographic overlap.
If you criticize Israel,
No.
people start
Because we're dealing with hypotheticals.
No.
Let's
You're making me sound abstract when I'm being very
So
specific.
I'm being very specific here. Does anybody here believe that Israel and the Jewish people are the same thing? The state of Israel.
It's described as a Jewish state. It is described as a Jewish state.
And
How foolish of me to think that the word Jewish in Israel and state
Most
connect.
of the people in Israel are Jewish, but there are more Jews outside of Israel. So the two coincide to a certain extent, but they're not exactly
But
the
what
same.
I'm also saying is Israel is more. 2 seconds. Israel is more diverse religiously and ethnically than the UK, and we believe we live in a multicultural society here.
One question: is Israel a Jewish state?
It seems to define
it defines
itself
as a
such.
Jewish state.
So what?
And it's
it
not a
saying
constructive
it's
use of language.
Come into the camera. Come into the camera.
Is this
No. You've
are
got a
they
face for
claiming
camera.
ethnicity? Is this an ethnic state or is
No.
this a religious state?
No. It's neither. It's neither. It's
So how?
neither.
Oh,
This needs an
oh,
explanation.
okay.
I mean,
what is
yeah,
it? No,
it's-
but now we're back. What
Okay.
is it? What
Yes.
is it?
So, Israel defines itself as the Jewish state. What that means,
Yeah.
it is a state with a Jewish character. So the national language.
What does that mean
is,
for people who are
So
not Jewish
I'm
as
trying to
well?
explain.
Wait,
I'm trying to explain. The national language is Hebrew. Its flag has the Star of David, the symbol of the Jewish people. However, its laws are democratic and protect the rights of the minority communities within it. So as an example, if you drive around Israel, every sign you will see will be in Arabic, Hebrew and English,
Yeah.
so that all the minorities that live there can read it.
Okay,
There
okay.
are synagogues,
So-
there are mosques, there are churches.
So there is
Question.
one national language, there is one national religion, but they're accepting of other people who go to Israel.
In the same way
They
that
accept those people,
in this,
do they?
yes. In the same way that the UK, the national language here is English. Looking around here, many people here weren't born in this nation. Either they weren't born, or their parents, or their parents' parents, but they're still British.
Yeah, it's not outlawed to
English
speak
is the
another
language.
language or to practice another religion, but the only national language and religion is Hebrew and Judaism.
In the
right?
same way that in the UK, the Church of England
Yeah, fair enough,
is
fair
our
This
national
is
religion.
the small print. You're still mixing biological inevitabilities with choices within one word.
Yes.
Don't run from that point, please, because
You cannot be
That-
a
that's
Jewish
what
you
state
really
and
are
a democratic
doing
state.
my
that,
questions
and
are
it's,
about.
it's
choose
making
one or
life
the other.
very, very hard.
So
for
say very
people-
simple, so I understand what your question is, and then hopefully
Okay,
I can answer it.
I'm saying forget Jewish for a minute.
Yeah.
Just when we look at the whole planet and how we should assess people, I'm responsible for my choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I expect to be judged on my choices.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for my sex, my skin color, my nationality,
Yeah.
because I just landed here, yeah?
Yes.
So if you want to take a pop at me for my choices, my religion or my politics, go for it.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say, oh, you're anti-men or you're anti-white or something.
Good.
But if you start taking a pop at me for my sex or my skin color, you can fuck off because I didn't choose this. Yeah.
point.
Now, I think that courtesy should be extended to everybody,
Good point.
including people who are of Jewish descent, genealogy. They are sacrosanct. Nobody should. And if Hamas is saying they want to attack people because of their DNA, then Hamas can fuck off. Yeah. But if Hamas are trying ineptly to express that they have an issue with people who consider themselves Jewish and they're making by choice and are making political choices, Hamas needs a way of expressing that so it's not confused with
Yeah, but
being
not
racist.
when Hamas wants to kill those
Yeah,
people.
so Hamas
no,
actually is out of
sorry,
order.
sorry.
Charter on the 1st of May 2017.
They changed their charter.
Yeah, to
So-
say that they're only going against Zionists and not
Hold on.
So I haven't. I don't know that. I'll go away and I'll research
check
that.
that.
Well,
because
whether
they
it,
changed
hang on.
it.
Imagine,
Hezbollah-
imagine hypothetically then that's true, because we don't have to have the facts, it's not the point. The point is, if Hamas have legitimately said our problem is with an ideology, which I believe you'll accept Zionism is,
Yeah.
it's not something you're born
No,
with,
Zionism
it's
is
a
an
choice.
ideology,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Zionism is an
Religion's also Judaism is also
Okay.
also
So
a
it
choice.
is not racist for, if it were true, it wouldn't be racist for Hamas to have a problem with Zionism
Can we-
unless they extended it into Jewish.
Can we move away from Hamas and Hezbollah? The only reason I say that is because they're not saying this. So I'm not going to turn around and say that Hamas.
I'd rather do a hypothetical conversation.
Yeah. So
to be
let's deal with the hypothetical people called the Geordies. And,
Oh, great. Yeah,
and
you
another
just-
hypothetical
a bunch of
called the
Northerners complaining.
Scousers.
Okay, yeah.
And the Scousers believe.
You claim that there was equality, that there was equality in Israel.
In Israel.
Yeah, in Israel.
Yeah.
Is Gaza part of Israel? Or
No,
not?
no, Gaza
It's not
isn't.
part.
Gaza's
West
under
Bank?
the.
West Bank?
So the West Bank is it's divided into three sections: Area A, B, and C. Area one area is under Israel fully. The other is shared between the Palestinian Authority and Israel, and the other is fully with Israel. I think that's my rabbi who I was meant to be meeting here.
Oh, is it?
He's very, very,
Very
good.
nice
The
man.
guy with the hat.
Ben Abrahamson is amazing. He's amazing.
Anyway, so when you say equality,
Looks like Santa Claus.
when you say equality, can you define by what you mean equality?
What I mean by equality is you cannot discriminate under law against an Arab, you can't discriminate against a Christian, you can't discriminate against a Jew. So as an example,
Yeah.
if I want to make a Jewish only hospital ward, or I want to make a Jewish only that goes against the law. And there are racists in Israel, as an example, who will try and put pressure on the government to enact racist laws.
Yeah.
So I have a question. How do you explain the Jewish settlements that are being built in Gaza and the West Bank?
So-
now? Because
Louder.
how do you explain the Jewish settlements in Gaza and the West Bank?
Perfect. It's a great question. First, there are no settlements in Gaza. Israel disengaged from Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005. There were settlements.
Really disengaged. They control air, sleep. What goes in and
Can
what
I
comes
answer?
out.
Can I answer the
Okay,
question?
let me
Can I
answer.
answer? We're talking
Let
about
me be honest.
settlements. We're not talking about control of borders. We're literally talking about settlements, and then we can move on to
Whatever
borders.
comes in,
Then
they control the nutrition
Yeah,
we
they-
could
what they eat.
You should come into the camera.
either come into the camera, or stop interrupting.
Well, let's let him finish first, and then we can go
So
there.
settlements in the West Bank is a much more interesting question because they do exist.
Yeah.
And so I can give you my
But
position.
there are also people who
So-
want to reclaim their Jewish faith, who are moving into Gaza and who are
They're not moving into Gaza. No one, Jews aren't allowed into Gaza.
West Bank.
okay,
West Bank,
sure,
West Bank only, yeah.
but-
But let's say, so I'll deal with that because that's irrelevant, and we're kind of moving on, so we can come back
No,
to
it's
yours.
fine, no.
So Jews lived in the West Bank since time immemorial. What happened was in 1948 there was a war between Israel and all the surrounding Arab states.
Look, I
And
know the
it's the only way I can
historical
answer. It's the only way I can answer your question.
Okay, I know the history.
But it's the
Like the
only
Six-Day War and the
it's-
Ramadan War.
It's the only way I can answer. In
Or Yom
1949, the
Kippur, whatever you
Jordanians drove the Jews out that had been living in the West Bank. Yeah,
Maybe this will make it easier.
it's fine. We can go there. We did this
Oh,
already.
new phone.
Yeah, well,
So for the camera and for yourself, the Jews were driven out in 1949. What then happened was in 1967, Israel won the war and took the territory from Jordan. So it was part of Jordan. Jordan declared sovereignty over it. Britain and Pakistan recognised Jordan, the West Bank as being Jordan and not Palestine, and nobody said anything. In fact, Yasser Arafat and King Abdullah both said that Jordan is Palestine and Palestine is Jordan, but that's a separate conversation. In 1967, Israel conquered or retook the land from the Jordanians, and they started inviting the Jews back to their homes. So what do I mean by that? Hebron is an example. Jews lived in Hebron for hundreds and hundreds, centuries, thousands of years, all the way back to Abraham. Abraham is mentioned as being in Hebron, and that's where he's buried. And so what then happened, the Jews moved back. They rebuilt their synagogue there, which had been occupied by a Palestinian family. They rebuilt the religious... So I'm just coming
okay.
back. So settlements are very complex. My personal belief is Jews and Arabs should be able to live on both sides of the line. I believe that there are Arab towns in Israel, there are Arab cities in Israel, there are mixed cities in Israel with Jews and Arabs living side by side, and that's what I want. And I would support a two-state solution, a Palestinian state, if the settlements or the settlers aren't ethnically cleansed. I believe Jews have a right to live there just like Palestinians have a right to live there.
okay, do you acknowledge that there was a Palestinian state before Israel established
Never.
itself?
There has never ever been a
Okay.
Palestinian state. That doesn't mean I won't support a future one. The Palestinian
So-
people largely came into existence in the 60s. However, were there Arabs living there? Were there Arabs living there for thousands of years or hundreds of years? Definitely.
Well,
Absolutely.
thousands of years
After the
actually. I mean,
council.
there
So
are
some, most-
Arabs living
Abu
in
Bakr.
Israel who have been kicked out of their homes,
So-
who can
Yeah.
trace back
So- so-
People allowed to come back.
So
7-8 generations
most
back,
Arabs-
and
most-
they're being replaced by European Jews who
Yes.
have absolutely, in terms
No-
of the like 100-200 year history of the land, have no connection
So-
to it.
so-
I mean, I can go back to, let's say 10,000 years
Can I ask you
ago
a Palestinian
and say,
just because it makes it an easy
no,
conversation?
I'm not
You're not okay.
But I can trace my ancestry back 10,000 years to, let's say, the Mediterranean, right? Does that give me
So
claim to,
to answer your
Mediterranean
question,
land, or
so two of the biggest leaders the Palestinians had were, one was Yasser Arafat, the other was Izzeddin al-Qassam. Izzeddin al-Qassam was from Lebanon. Yasser Arafat was from Cairo. Some of the most, we were talking about this earlier, some of the most common surnames amongst the Palestinians, Al-Masri, the Egyptian, Al-Bosnak, the
so you're saying Palestinians don't?
Al-Maghrebi, there's many
Okay,
Palestinians.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is Palestinians have recently.
So
So
let
you
me
just
let
don't-
me
you just
put the
don't
word.
acknowledge
Let
that
me put.
Palestinians have been living
So
in-
let
Yeah, right.
let
So
me
what happened
answer.
to the indigenous?
So let me answer, and I'll give you most Arabs in the Israel region came over with the Arab conquest of Israel. When Masjid al-Aqsa was originally built, well, Qubbat al-Sakra was
but
built.
that doesn't, I mean,
So
it doesn't
that's
discount the fact
let's
that
say
it
that's
was still their home.
1400
It's
years. So
still-
I'm just answering.
sure,
1400 years. Many Arabs came over that period. Many were already there, and they were Christians or Jews that converted to Islam with the conquest. But many more came over later. And how do I know that? In 1882, the Ottomans took Can I just answer? In 1882, the Ottomans took a census of the region. There were 270,000 Arabs living there at the time. By 1946, that population had swelled to 1.26 million. It was the fastest growing population explosion in the Middle East. Why? Because the British colonized it and started investing huge amounts of money in infrastructure, which created economic opportunities, and Jews and Arabs moved there en masse. So I am not denying that many Palestinians have lived there for many years, and those ones that have lived there the longest descend from Jews. And there are Jews. If you go to the tomb of Samuel, if you go to the tomb of Samuel, you'll see a Palestinian village, and above the doors they have stars of David because they used to be Jewish.
Yeah.
So again, the question, I thought I answered. I said I am for Jews and Arabs living on both sides of the line.
Kind of shocking. I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, 750,000 Arabs were displaced.
Yes.
Circa 1945, 1948.
You're right. You're right.
Yes?
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing they didn't just voluntarily go, well, I was living in that house
You are
and
wrong.
now I'm not.
You are wrong.
They
You
really
are
just
wrong.
felt like
So let me give you.
750,000 Palestinians
so-
decided to leave their homes.
That is a
if I can
hard-
answer, yeah.
Many Israeli professors have documented.
Dude, be on camera. Be on camera. Or
Dude,
willingly
what are
left.
you afraid of?
Okay,
Say on the
so
camera.
yeah.
Man.
Many Israeli professors have confessed and have document proof that many Palestinians were massacred and driven out of their houses.
Okay.
Some people have the keys from their grandparents' house.
yeah, I believe that's
Okay.
probably
Yeah.
true,
They
but
have
maybe I'm
keys from their
mistaken.
grandparents, and they're not allowed in. Yusuf, you are allowed to go back to Israel, but the man who has the key of his grandparents' house is not allowed to go in. How is
Okay.
this justice?
Okay, can I respond
Yeah.
first to your question,
How
then
is
I
this
can deal with
justice?
his question. Okay, first to address your question. Yes, 750,000 Arabs, Palestinians did flee in 1948. A million Jews also fled. People don't know this. There were a million Jewish refugees from the Arab states. There are now 3,000, I'll finish and then you're going to interject. There are now 3,000 Jews living in the Arab world. There are more Jews in Boreham Wood Synagogue, in Boreham Wood, than there are in the entire Arab world. Yet we lived there far longer. We were there before Islam. We've lived there for our greatest academies were in Iraq. Our religious academies were driven from those lands. So Jews and Arabs were driven from their lands in 1948. Now, some of them...
Can I respond to that?
No, can I just finish my point and then you can respond? Some of them were driven by force, like you say. The cities of Lod and Ramla, there was a whole background for why those cities were emptied. It was to do with, there was a Jordanian legion stationed there. There was conflict backwards and forwards. They arranged a peace treaty, but then the Arab chief, the leader of the town who arranged the peace treaty was shot by the Jordanis, and eventually that city was depopulated, to use a horrible word, and those Palestinians became refugees. And I don't support that, I don't like that, but that's war, and war is horrible. The majority of Arabs that fled in 1948, the majority, if you want in, stay in, otherwise be quiet and let other people speak. In 1948, the majority of Arabs that fled did so because the Arab High Committee told them that we are going to destroy the Jews, we're going to crush the Jews, you need to flee or we will kill you. And I'll give you an example of that. There's a city in the north of Israel called Haifa. Haifa is a mixed city. It has Jews and Arabs living there today. The Jewish mayor, I think, was called Moshe Levy at the time, and he begged the Palestinian counterpart, the Arab counterpart, not to leave the city. He said, look, whatever happens between the Jews and Arabs, we're friends, our people, we've lived side by side here, you don't have to leave. And he begged him with tears in his eyes not to leave the city. But the command came down from the Arab High Committee that the Arabs needed to leave, and they were threatened with violence, and they were told we will not be held accountable. Stories like what you were said was propagated. The Arabs were told the Jews are raping people, they're killing people, they're massacring. You need to flee. And like in any conflict zone, like what's happening in Syria today, in Syria, millions of people have fled Syria.
But not all of those stories were propagated, though, because you do have, I mean, there's been a lot of documentary evidence of people talking about how they lost their homes, they were forced out of their homes.
So I've said
that
that I've accepted there were instances, but they were the minority. The 750,000 that fled, the majority fled, and I speak to Palestinians all of
put
the
a
time.
percentage on it. So of the
I can't give a
750, no, just
percentage.
watch you must have an underlying guess in your head as to what is
don't.
acceptable.
I don't.
What would be an acceptable?
What I can say is,
what would be an acceptable hypothetical percentage to you of people who were genuinely lost their home.
Right, so I like to talk about things that I actually know rather than things that
Yeah, but I want to evaluate your moral level, and I can do that with hypotheticals far better.
Can I just respond with my own words rather than the way you're forcing me to? The major cities of Haifa, Jaffa, which did have large Palestinian or Arab populations in them, they fled voluntarily. There was definitely fighting between Jews and the invading armies.
I mean, I know a lot of Palestinians, and they would completely disagree with,
And
what you just said.
And I know
so.
a lot that wouldn't as well. So it really comes against my friends and your friends then.
Yeah. So just I haven't. Sorry.
No,
did you wanna
go.
I have another question.
Can I just ask what your background is, or is that too personal?
Well, I don't see how that matters in terms of the argument, right?
It kind of,
Just ask.
Well, so we can talk about that later, but
Okay.
how do you explain the number of children who have been shot by IDF forces for doing, silly things like throwing stones at tanks? And I mean, that's a human rights violation to the grossest degree, and that
this is
can't stand
this
behind
is
that. I don't think there's any justification.
So this is the craziness of the world that we live in. Yeah, in conflict and war. Sadly,
Children shouldn't get shot.
Can I answer the question? You asked me a question. Please give me the courtesy of answering it. In conflict zones, people die. So if you look at Gaza, which is where you're probably citing, which is where we've had the casualties in the last year or so, the casualties of the conflict have been on the Gaza border. Now, can you stop heckling?
Me?
Whoever just whispering in my ear.
They're just talking. No.
Like the only way we find peace is if we talk and engage and listen to each other's narratives.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Gaza border, every Friday, after Friday prayers, after Jummah prayers in Gaza, the Hamas bus in people to the fence with the objective of putting civilians, putting their militants or their terrorists, as we'd call them, amongst the civilians to try and break through the fence, and so that they can murder Jews on the other side. That's the purpose of the protest. Now ask yourself a question. If you are a mother or a father and your child is living in Gaza, and every week you hear of one or two people getting killed trying to break into Israel in these violent riots, would you put your child into that conflict zone? And then the follow-up question is it Israel's fault then if it defends its borders from people trying to break in?
I mean, a lot of these children are voluntarily running up to the border. That they
What
don't
are they
understand
doing
it.
in
It's
a
not like
conflict
they're-
zone?
No, but it's not like
There's
their parents
child-
are
it
shuttling
is.
them
I'm
off.
sorry.
and
Hamas
I don't think you can. I don't know.
Hamas
I've seen the
Hamas have
documentaries,
training schools.
I've read
Can I just?
extensively about
Okay,
this.
sorry.
No, I mean, I don't think you can say that every single child that's been shot by the IDF has been shuttled to the border by their parents and has been encouraged to throw stones and try and jump the fence
But
and
they're
kill.
not, they're coming from
I mean,
Gaza.
I think that's
They're
an
coming from the
outrageous thing to
city.
say.
That's not what he's saying.
They're coming.
Well, that is what he's saying, though.
The people.
I don't think parents are shuttling off their teenagers.
No,
to
Hamas are shuttling in.
And parents are complicit in this, is what you're saying.
So I'm saying, actually, I retract what I say. There will be parents who definitely don't know that their children are on that bus. So absolutely.
Right.
I will say there are some parents that knowingly, because what happens when that child is killed is they become a shaheed and they're celebrated.
Well,
and
not necessarily.
Not
because
necessarily, but
plenty
many
of- because There are
instances.
plenty of Palestinian Christians who don't subscribe
not in
to
Gaza.
that
There's
term.
very, very few Christians in Gaza. That's in the West Bank.
All right. Well.
So let's just still with Gaza. And so what I'm saying is that the population is away from the fence. There's almost like a buffer zone between them. So for the people to get there, they're bussed in, which Hamas pays for. And so my issue is with Hamas. What are Hamas doing? Bringing children to a violent conflict where Hamas are shooting at Israeli soldiers and Israeli soldiers are shooting back at Hamas when Hamas have children, families all intermixed.
Okay. Let's just entertain that for a second.
What he's saying. Every time
No,
he's
but
claiming
It
No,
doesn't
no.
mean it's not true.
But-
He may have
One
some
second,
truth.
one
Okay,
second,
let-
one second. I'd like to add something in this. Imagine you're a Gaza,
Yeah.
or today you're a Gaza, but yesterday you lived on a man-made border. You live beyond a man-made border. Your grandparents are from there. If you try to go there, you are shot dead.
Okay. Yeah. No. And let's just entertain that. Sorry. Are you?
Not only are you shot dead, water, electricity, everything is controlled from outside. You can't even flee from Gaza.
Yeah.
You can't even run away from Gaza. Even if you wanted to leave Gaza, you can't even leave Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are bombed every few years. You are bombed back to the Stone Age.
And I think
So that's a
Wait,
great point.
what do you
Can I
do?
respond to
Yeah.
that?
Actually,
So what-
hold. Let me check in the point in a minute because it's got to the point where people are going, well, you say this and I say that. No one's mentioned the United Nations, yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know how much you rate the United Nations, but they have...
Abysmal.
Abysmal. Okay, that's important. Because the United Nations, number one, it's a hell of a lot of people, but the majority can be wrong. But, I mean, it's quite important that the United Nations...
The United Nations is a democracy of dictatorships.
Okay, okay, got it. You do understand where that... I'm just trying to give it a bit of perspective.
To put some perspective on that, Saudi Arabia heads up the Human Rights Commission. Iran sits on the Women's Rights Commission for the United Nations. The United Nations is a farce which basically panders to political voting blocs and political commercial blocs within the United Nations. It's not an indicator of what is morally just or not just. It basically reflects the nation sentiment.
So let's it's being seduced. It's being seduced by the power. It's being seduced by the epic GDP of Palestine, because that's really going to break.
No, it's basically why. Can I make a point, please? Go ahead. So the reason why Israel is on all of our tongues is 3 simple reasons. I was going to say to correct myself. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Al-Quds is one of the holiest cities, the 3rd holiest cities for Muslims. Yerushalayim is the holiest city for Jews. Jerusalem is the holiest city for Christians in the world. And because of this, it's all on our agenda. And there is a huge, you cannot deny it, an Islamic voting bloc within the United Nations. And if you look at the consistent voting trends of the United Nations, they're influenced by that bloc. So why would non-Muslim nations follow the Islamic voting bloc? Oil. Israel has very little to offer the world. It's a tiny little nation. Yes, we make some great technology, we make great hummus, but within the United Nations, money talks.
When the UN makes, and I don't know the answer, I really don't know the answer. Yeah. When the UN makes a legal ruling, as it has about the expansion of so on.
There's two types of rulings.
What percentage? The fact that say half of the people in there are Arab, you're using that as an argument, but what percentage of support do they need in order to make it a law? My guess is it's far more than that. It's not just about biased Arab states. We're talking about European states.
You're missing the point.
Security Council.
You're missing. So you've got the Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. So they're 2 different types. Security Council, I believe, are enforceable. I don't think General Assembly are.
Well, none of them are enforceable, but Security Council ones are binding.
Yeah, binding. Sorry, there we go. Thank you.
Good distinction.
Yeah.
European countries vote on their economic interests. If you believe that nations in the United Nations vote from the moral authority of what they believe in, you're mistaken. And how do I know that's the case? Because if you look at nations like Britain, France, Germany, what they tend to do is abstain. They choose not to vote either way. And what tends to happen is South American states and Islamic states form a voting bloc, and they tend to vote against Israel. And if you look at the voting trends, they're overwhelming. The South American nations and the Islamic nations voting against Israel. Some European nations voting against Israel, I agree. The majority abstaining.
Germany, France
tend to abstain.
They tend to abstain.
Yeah.
So Germany and France didn't vote in favour of opposing the settlement.
On that particular resolution, you have to give which resolution.
I don't know either. I just wanted.
So there was one, for instance. We're probably
it's quite important. I'm looking at the nations I might respect as being functional democracies to see how they voted. You're quoting me that there are Arab ones who would have voted because they're part of it.
With the greatest respect, because Germany votes a particular way, doesn't fill a Jew with confidence.
Okay.
Germany has.
That was an unfortunate.
No. And the reason I say this, the Jewish people we feel persecuted.
Forget Germany.
No. The Jewish people, we feel that the Jews, when we were in Europe, we were hated. We were accused of being communists, capitalists, everything else. We were persecuted.
How do you feel about the French?
And now the French were the same. The French massively persecuted us.
I think Germany has been quite guilt-tripped by.
I would agree with that. I would agree. Germany is one of the more pro-Israel nations within the United Nations now because of their historic legacy. So the Jews now feel like the state of Israel is the Jew of the world. And so we're not filled with confidence. We tried living under you guys and it didn't work out for us.
I don't blame the level of
but
fear.
to bring the conversation back to which I thought was more actually, I've lost my chain of thought. What was your question?
Okay,
I wanted to respond to it. It was the blockade. Sorry, it was him.
Yeah.
So we talked about the blockade. You said that Israel is controlling the borders.
But it is controlling the borders.
But
it's controlling
how many borders does Gaza have? two. One is with
I haven't
Israel.
fact-checked this,
Well,
but
no,
I
it
think
is.
it-
Egypt's
yeah.
on the south, Israel's on the north. Israel and Gaza have been at war since 1948, effectively. Since Egypt conquered Gaza in 48, the two states, or the two areas, have been at war with each other. Now it's under Hamas, they're still at war. Hamas have fired tens of thousands of rockets. On the south is Egypt. How long have Egypt been at war with Gaza?
I don't think they are at war.
They're not at war. Yeah, everyone talks about Israel enforcing the blockade. Nobody talks. Two nations that are at war with
now,
each other.
Now you're just comparing like the lesser of two evils.
No, not the
are
lesser
you
of two.
saying?
Not the lesser of two. Israel. Israel and Gaza are at war with each other, so you would expect that there wouldn't be movement between the border. Gaza and Egypt aren't at war, so you would expect there'd be movement. They're literally the same people. Like Al-Masri is the most common surname in
Yeah.
Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look. I mean, I feel like there's an underlying reason to why there isn't
I'll tell you what the reason is.
movement.
The
but I'd
current,
have to
so the
read up
Muslim
on that.
Brotherhood would have opened the border, but the military regime in Egypt is more afraid of Hamas than Israel is afraid of Hamas.
Okay.
And that Hamas were created by the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah,
Sheikh
I mean,
Yassin-
it still sounds like it's like one evil versus the other.
No,
right?
it's not one
They're
evil.
being
You've got two nations that are at war with each
blockaded on
other.
both sides.
Two nations that aren't at war with each other. You'd expect the movement to happen. Like if we were at war with
Okay,
Scotland, we
sure,
wouldn't expect
sure,
movement
okay,
of.
I'll take that. Going back to an earlier point, just let's entertain the idea that I don't personally buy this. I need to read about it more. I won't just take your word for it. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Hamas is shuttling children to the Israeli border, and they're being encouraged to throw pebbles at IDF forces. How does that then? I mean, how can you justify that killing those children?
So that's not
is-
what
I mean,
that's not what I'm doing. So
protecting-
let me be really, really clear.
Yeah.
I am definitely not justifying the killing of Palestinian children. I think it's tragic for every Palestinian child that is shot. What we're saying is we have a difference of opinion over who is responsible. Now, I hold Hamas accountable, and you're holding the Israeli government accountable.
Well, I think, if I'm holding a gun and if I shoot a child, I'm
But if you're holding,
Pretty
as
sure
an example, because that's a nice straw man you build, but as an example,
is it?
No,
is
that's
that?
straw
I don't
man.
think it's
so
a straw
that's not
man.
what I'm saying.
Oh, I thought
So
you said
as,
straw man.
as an example, no, I'm saying I didn't say that an Israeli throwing a Palestinian throwing a rock at Israel, and then an Israeli shooting them.
Oh, that was a straw
So
man.
what I'm saying is Hamas were condemned by the United Nations for storing missiles in schools. Hamas were condemned by the United Nations, who is incredibly anti-Israel, as we've established already, for launching missile attacks from mosques.
You see, United Nations I shouldn't trust because they're a bunch of corrupt.
No, I don't
institutions.
trust them, but I'm giving an example of someone who I believe is biased against Israel, giving evidence that their facilities in Gaza were used by Hamas, where children are present, to attack Israel from.
That's a bit of a double win. So when the UN criticise Israel, they're a bunch of scumbags. But when they make a criticism
No,
of Hamas,
it's called using your, the institution that you brought up. As you were bringing them. I don't like the United Nations, but I'm
Got
saying
it.
this is the institution that you introduced to the debate. Even they, are critical
I
of Hamas.
understand the even, and that you're right. That will be interesting if it's true that they are so in favour of the Palestinians. It would be strange they criticised them. I take your point, but simultaneously you're making a reading of them, which on the one hand goes they're scumbags, and on the other point goes suddenly their criticism has some validity. So you're being inconsistent on your take on UN.
So I think it's a fair thing to say,
You're-
but there's no other measure, unfortunately, that I can use
You're,
other than
you're kind of cherry picking when the UN is a source
Well, the
of
UN is a
information.
complex organisation. He referred to the Human Rights Commission, and I think on the other he's referring to the Security Council. So it's a very
Okay, so
complex
you're not
exercise.
cherry-
and
there's
it's
no
also
chance
to
you're cherry
interrupt
picking.
just for a little bit, because I feel like I'll never get the
Yeah.
chance to ask
Never,
these two
you
questions. Okay, just two questions.
just
and
say that
that's
so you
it.
can stick your
Quick
fingers up
que- Yeah,
a bit?
exactly. I've been waiting for a long while. Okay, so first of all, when a person who's Jewish by blood
Yeah.
leaves Judaism in terms of religion,
Yeah.
are they still considered Jewish?
Yeah.
They're still Jewish. Okay.
Yeah.
What if a person who's not Jewish by blood, a woman,
Yeah.
converts to Judaism, has a kid,
Yeah.
and then the woman stops practicing Judaism? Is the child Jew?
Yeah,
Jew?
and the woman's still Jewish as well. Once you convert it, so Jews consider it's like irreversible.
Hotel California.
So don't know the reference. I know the song. So if a
So in
woman,
the eyes of other Jews, you're always a Jew once you convert to Judaism.
yeah, unless there is a question on your conversion. So let's say that someone converted to Judaism, and then as soon as they came out the mikveh, which is part of the conversion process, you immerse in water. They came out and they then ate a bacon sandwich. The rabbis would judge that maybe this person wasn't sincere at the moment they said that I'm Jewish.
But isn't that an orthodox position? Would that
That's
be the
an
case?
orthodox-
Right, so
yeah.
that wouldn't carry for the liberal.
So liberal and progressive are modern denominations of Judaism which have changed the rules, and that there is an internal conversation within Judaism.
And that's what? How does is that a 50-50 split? It's 50-50 in this country, isn't it?
No, I'd say there's more non-Orthodox Jews in this country than Orthodox, but the majority follow the Orthodox definition, if that makes sense, of who is a Jew.
So, to be clear, so if Hamas were being creative, they could all convert to Judaism for a day, then convert back,
That'll be
and
the
you
day.
guys would have to include them as Jews.
So
I'm just thinking.
you
What
joke,
an
but
evil idea.
Yeah, what an evil idea. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing is, it's not like Islam. To become a Muslim, I say La ilaha illallah, follow up sentence, and then Muslim.
Yeah.
Judaism works more like a nation. You
The
have to be
answer is
accepted
yes.
by
The
the
answer
nation.
yes.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes, but you'd have to.
The answer
but
is yes.
You'd have to,
Hamas, okay, just so you know, the answer is yes.
yeah, but you have to have a religious course that would convert you, and I don't think any religious court would convert Hamas.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Which is,
It's quite
which is-
unlikely.
in the same way that we don't let ISIS into this country. Actually,
check.
that's not necessarily true. If you were,
Well, some people would like to others to allow
Joseph, I'd like
ISIS
to ask
fighters.
you, because
get nervous when people bring out phones.
about no, just like you heard in America about 1,000 rabbis signed a petition against Donald Trump's halt on temporary halt on immigration
I
from Muslim
didn't
countries.
hear that, so I'm taking your word that that happened.
So I'm just curious, why would they do such a thing, even though they know Muslims are going to be very anti-Jewish, allowing to this?
American Jews are the most progressive liberal Americans there are. They vote overwhelming for Democrat. Donald Trump is the most pro-Israel president
He's the Messiah.
they've ever had in America. Like
It
it's
should worry
crazy.
you, shouldn't it?
I mean, for me, I support Israel, so it's actually a good thing.
No, but I mean, if Donald Trump's on your side, surely you double take.
I mean, yeah, if
that's
Donald Trump is for Israel and the Jews in America are against Donald
Yeah.
Trump,
He might change.
it kind of creates a contradiction.
No, and it really does, and this is something. So you have people like Ilhan Omar, you have people like Rashida Tlaib, and these are people who I consider to be quite hostile to the Jewish people, both publicly and
So
privately.
there's different factions of Jews.
So
Yeah.
these,
It's
so
a Jewish
these-
divide.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, they're Hasidic
So
Jews
yeah, I would
who
go
are
even
against
further. The
state
majority
Israel.
of American Jews are barely Jewish.
No, I mean, how do you explain Orthodox?
like
So,
Shia
so,
and Sunni.
all
Some
the,
of
so,
them
all
say, oh,
the-
they're not
no,
real
no, it
Muslims.
didn't
They're
include
not-
the
so,
Orthodox
so what,
Zionist
let me
Jews
let
that
me
signed the petition.
let me try and respond to what back up what I just
But there
said.
are also Orthodox Jews who don't support the state of Israel.
Only
as well.
because
They're the
only
tiny,
because-
tiny
only
minority.
only because they think that Israel shouldn't exist.
You've
until
actually
the-
got an Orthodox Jew
until
here
the-
from Israel, which the camera can't see, but he's an amazing guy, and they should definitely watch him.
I tell a
How about Ben
story?
Abraham?
Can I
Yeah,
tell
he's
a
very
story
good
to
listener,
back that up?
very pro-Muslim.
I got invited for Jewish New Year by my employer. I thought, oh, trying. So I went off and I sort of, found out all about it. And, you had to say the lachaim and all the rest, and I took bread and all the rest. And I arrived and they said, oh, we're just having Chinese, come in. And that was it. We just had a meal.
So
and
they come to me with every different
and it was
experience.
takeaway. It was takeaway Chinese
So-
food.
and then that's it. Most of American Jews are quite they moved post-Holocaust and pre-Holocaust to America. It was the land of opportunity, and many of them became less religious than their parents were. So in terms of Jewish identity, they probably have they're still Jewish, like 100% Jewish.
Do you think they're
but
naive?
they have the
do you think
most
they're
watered
naive
down.
of bringing Muslims in? It's
I
like, refugees.
I don't have an
welcome
issue with Muslims. I don't. It is almost 20% of Israelis are Muslim. I don't think Muslims are the problem. I think radical Islam is a problem.
How can you tell apart?
By
going to the
the
country.
ideology, what they
Ideology,
practice. You can't tell what. So, like this man here could be like Osama bin Laden and look like this, and we wouldn't know. Like you can't tell what's in somebody's. You're definitely not. But I hope you're not. You can't tell what's in someone's
dead,
heart. You
isn't
can't tell. Yeah, he is dead. That's a good point. But or is he? Is he with Elvis? And so what I'm trying to say is you can't tell somebody's intentions by the length of their beard. You can't. I mean,
But you can deduce
fortunately,
their section.
you can try to guess what they may affiliate with, but really it's what they preach. So for me, Islam isn't the problem. For me, Muslims aren't the problem. For me, the Muslims that are the problem are the ones that want to round up the Jews and kill them. That's a problem.
I get it.
But that's not the majority.
if I see two people having a fight, there can be complex reasons for it. The question I always ask myself is who threw the first punch? It's not about like both of them will be able to give me a history of you hit me here, you need me there, and so on. What I need to know, what kicked it off?
So you
because
tell me what happened. Who
whoever
invaded?
threw the first punch, I take in some way to be the most culpable.
Okay, so to that point, in 1948.
Yeah.
So no,
That's
this
how
is
I view a
this
fight.
is a,
Exactly.
this is
Do you view
this is
fight
a,
the same
this is a
way?
great point. Yes, yes. In 1948,
Okay.
Israel declared independence. What happened?
Go on.
8 Arab armies invaded.
Okay.
If the Palestinians at that point had said,
If I ask
So
those
can I-
Arab
can I-
armies, if I ask the Arab armies why they invaded, what would they say?
they would say because we don't. They said it themselves. They said we want to pave the road from Damascus to Jerusalem with the skulls of Jews. We want to drive the Jews into
That's
the
a
sea.
battle cry. What would be their rationale?
So their
for what they
rationale
did?
is they didn't support.
Destroy the
They
state of
believed this was Arab land, not Jewish land.
Right.
And so they wanted to, as he said, destroy the state of Israel. So as soon as Israel declared independence,
wasn't a state at that
no, in
point.
1940,
They
it's at the
preserved
point.
their own
It's at the
land,
point of
right?
declaring independence. So at the
Right.
point where Israel
I mean,
declared
I
independence.
can't just declare independence on this patch of land and say this is, my
Yeah,
land.
but
and
you
say-
have to get it voted on through the UN.
Before we get caught in the tangent,
then
before we
it
get caught,
gets legitimacy
before
through
We're on the
international
we're on the
before,
first punch.
before we get distracted by the tangent, what I would like to add into the conversation is, in 1948, Israel declared independence. If in 1948 the Palestinians declared independence in Gaza and the West Bank, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. We would have had two states living side by side, hopefully in peace. What happened was Israel declared independence, and you may believe they're justified, but 8 Arab armies then invaded, and since then we've had perpetual war.
That's a statement of fact, but what I want to know is the motives and the moral ground for the people
Now
who
you're
made the decision.
now you're taking the goalposts and running them over
No,
here
I'm not. I'm
because
always
you
judging it
basically
on the
said
morality
you
of a
said who
decision.
threw the first punch.
Yeah.
So we established that the Arab armies threw the first punch, and now you're saying, well, it's not
No,
about
no,
the
no,
first
no.
punch;
Hang
it's
on,
about
we
the
didn't
morality.
establish
In the narrative you gave me, it seemed that way. I'm cutting deeper. Maybe your narrative is accurate. Okay. The narrative that I've picked up so far says, and I'm probably wrong on some points, that there was a meeting of the Jewish Council in, I think, May 1948. Golda Meir was there, and I think by one vote, I heard they decided to preemptively declare a Jewish state, and at that point they didn't have the support of the UN, I don't think. The UN then saw them do it and went, or certainly America, Truman went, oh, they've done it. Marshall said to Truman, this is going to cause trouble, but then Truman sanctioned it after the event, and the Arabs interpreted that if this happens, we're in deep trouble. The fact that they thought that when 750,000 Arabs relocated at pretty much the same time means they may have had a point which might have been a catalyst for Arab armies. I don't know if it was, I'm just asking you if it's possible it sort of happened that way.
But I don't think that's what happened.
Is that just because if that is what happened, I think there would be a legitimate criticism to be made of Israel, but if my facts are
Sorry,
wrong,
so
I need to know.
your criticism of Israel is that they declared independence.
If they declared independence in a way which was going to be incredibly detrimental to the Arab population.
How would it be detrimental? That if you read the Declaration of Independence,
Yeah.
it explicitly states that not a right that is given to the Jews will be denied to any other minority that's living there, which means the
Okay.
Arabs.
Sure,
And-
but
go
it's,
on.
no, I was just going to say, but it's still an issue if the majority of Israel is Arab, because then that kind of changes the democratic nature of the state, and that's why Israel has an avid interest to keep Gazans out of its state, because it as soon as those numbers shift, then it will fail to be a democracy.
And so this is where we ended this surreal world for me, because you opened the conversation by saying you objected to Jews living in the West Bank in the settlements, which is the exact same argument. So you're saying that for Jews to have a majority, that's a bit racist, but then you say no, actually the Arabs need a majority in the West Bank, and it's wrong that the settlers are there.
Yeah, because it's
And so-
artificial.
they're both artificial. They're both
Yeah, but
artificial.
one's been there for
No, they
very long
haven't.
time.
This is both have been there for a long time. This is the lie. Both have been there for a long time, and both are descendants of mass immigration. So, as you established at the beginning of the conversation, you may have missed it. The majority of Palestinians today don't descend from ancient communities. Most came in more recent years, just like
So
the
who were
Jews
the
did.
indigenous people there
The-
before the say 5-6
So,
years ago?
the only indigenous people that are around today with a collective identity are the Jews.
So then why doesn't, in order to solve the issue with Gaza, why doesn't Israel just screen every single Palestinian, bring all the people who who are not linked to Hamas into Israel and then just solve the problem
So I think
that way, right?
it's a really good question. It's basically, do you support a two-state solution or a one-state solution? Most Europeans are advocating for a two-state solution. Many of my settler friends, my radical racist settler friends, they're not racist, they advocate for a one-state solution. Many of the Palestinians advocate for a one-state solution. And so you're really entering the realm of what is the right solution for the region. If you believe that both people should live side by side in complete democratic harmony, then that's a one-state solution. You can call it Israel, you can call it Palestine, you can call it what you want to call it. It's going to cause problems, but that's a one-state solution. If you support a Palestine and an Israel, that's a two-state solution. Those that advocate for the two-state solution do so along ethnic lines. They say the Arabs are here and the Jews are here. The Arabs have a right to live here, the Jews have a right to live here, but the two shall not mix. And so it basically comes, where do you stand? Which do you think is the moral solution? And truthfully, from my heart, I don't think it matters what any of you think, because it's not for us to solve, it's for the Israelis and Palestinians.
Yeah, so-
and if we didn't interfere, they'd probably have peace.
So where do you think the Israeli sentiment is right now on that?
I think both the Palestinian and the Israeli sentiment is moving more on both sides to a one-state solution, and both sides envisage that one-state solution as their side being like the dominant side. Palestinians have consistently said, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Israel consistently said, we believe in a two-state solution, and the latest polls still say two-state solution, but that, I think, is changing, and we are seeing a change in the... Is that yours?
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was
Thank
his.
you. It's all right.
I see three nearly got a new bag.
But what about the nationality law?
The nation-state law. So this is one of the most misunderstood. It's said Israel passed the nation-state law, which basically Israel doesn't have a constitution. So nations that don't have constitution have basic laws which define the character of the state. And so it says that the national language is Hebrew. The flag is blue and white stripes with a blue Star of David. Like, these aren't problematic statements. These are pretty standard statements. But it was spun and people say, no, it's racist. It says the language is Hebrew. Like Mazel Tov, it's the Jewish state. Of course the language is Hebrew. That doesn't mean that Arabic doesn't have a primary position
But
in
it
the
also
state.
means that Israel has an interest in keeping the majority of the state Jewish,
So
right?
you keep saying that, and I actually agree. I think most Israelis do want the Jews to have the majority.
You made a point that the Israeli government doesn't distinguish between whether you're Palestinian, Arab, or Jewish, right?
Say that again, the Israeli?
You said, you made a statement, and you said the Israeli government doesn't distinguish, as in the laws apply, between Jewish people, Palestinian and Arab, and doesn't distinguish
Just let me
between them.
be really clear so you know what I'm saying. I'm saying an Israeli Arab. So an Arab that lives in Israel and has accepted or taken on Israeli citizenship. So in East Jerusalem, many of the Arabs or the Palestinians reject the citizenship, so they don't have an Israeli
So what do you call
passport.
the people that live in Israel now? Would you call them Jewish or not Jewish?
No,
Because you
Jewish.
just call them Arab, right?
The Israeli Arabs.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now,
Some of them identify as
there's an
Israeli
article
Arabs, some
that got
identify as
released
Palestinian.
recently, discussing that the Israeli government has been giving out permits to pharmaceutical companies to test medicinal purposes. I don't know what they're using it for, on Arab and Palestinian prisons.
I don't believe that.
That was published by your own newspaper.
So you'd have to show me. I
I'll
don't
show you
believe
that. And
it. Yeah.
secondly, the
If
reason
that did happen, you condemn it.
Yeah, absolutely.
that's
I don't
also
believe
those-
it happened, but if it did
That's
happen,
what's
I would be
really
opposed to it.
there's also evidence by your own academics, Israeli academics.
Which academics?
I have to bring up it on
Okay.
my phone. I was reading it recently. I'll bring it up to you after this. That I think between 1985 and 1995, there was 5,000 cases where Israeli prisoners that died in prison or were dead bodies had been used again for medicinal purposes.
So this is a it's a half truth. What happened, and it was an ethical scandal in Israel. Yeah. Israeli prisons, a third party that was dealing with the Israeli prisons was allowing organs to be taken for harvest. Not harvest is an agreement for medical reasons. For Jews, Christians, Muslims, it made no difference. They were doing it to.
No, I heard it was specifically.
That's what I'm saying. You heard wrong.
Okay, cool.
It was
So
it was across the board, and it was a big scandal in Israel.
I'll take that on board. I'll
look into
confirm. But alright, go on. I'll let you carry on. Go on. So that was what it was.
So That's the thing.
I just want to ask you about your claim. Because,
My claim, I've made a lot.
No, generally speaking.
Yeah.
You are, advocating the existence of Israel. From which sense? Is it from a political, point of view, or a religious point of view? Because now you know that they want to put the Israeli land or state as a Jewish only.
So no one wants to make it Jewish only. There is no law. So sorry, you've said something that isn't true.
They want to.
They don't. Who wants to?
The parties.
Which party? Likud has non-Jewish members. Like one of my best friends is a Bedouin Arab in Likud. It's what you're saying isn't true. No one's wanting to make it. And to answer your first question, for me, it's based on a political reason. First.
Can I temperature test you with a question?
You can, but if this rabbi's going, I'm going to leave because I told them to come here and I'd really like to.
I had one more question. Sorry.
Have you got to go to second, or have you got
If he's leaving, I've got to go. So just keep an eye on the guy with the black hat.
My second point I wanted to make was the reason why Judaism's on my tongue, or Jewish is on my tongue, because you said before, why is everyone talking about that?
Yeah.
That was the point. And you said so many other things happening that's similar to the Jewish and Palestinian conflict. My problem is with the anti-Semite international definition that was adopted in October.
I'm going to have to go. I'm really, really sorry. It's been a pleasure. Cool. I might come back. I'm just going to say a load of that.
We all agree. There's nobody left who disagrees. Yeah. But there's a camera running. Somebody pick a debate, a new debate, because it's going to get filmed. The camera's still running.
Who wants to take on my point?
What do you want?
I was saying that.
Oh, okay. Women are apparently.
I was going to have this conversation off screen.
Oh, no, you sure you don't want to do it on camera?
Well, it's like a tough one.
Good. That's why to put it on.
No, recently they've been doing it to the prisoners.
Really? Yeah.
And even recently, they've been.
Maybe once we've established something.
I'll be reasonable. I'm not going to go.
No, I know.
And when their families are asking for it back, either A, they don't give it back.
You see this guy's time, so
it comes back with his card.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, he's not going. He's just doing another interview.
Okay, cool.
He's come all the way from Israel. I told him to come.
Is he your rabbi?
So he's a rabbi who is probably at the forefront of bringing Muslims and Jews together. And I told him he's got to come to Speaker's Corner.
That's great.
Okay, here's. I ask anybody this, no matter what I'm debating. Ideally, I want to debate with people who can give me the best counter-argument to their own position, yeah? If you can't self-critique your own position, you're not someone to take so seriously. So what I'd ask you is, what's your worst condemnation of the state of Israel that you would reasonably make? And I'm hoping that you constructively can make some.
So there's many criticisms I have of the state
Cool,
of
Joe, if you
Israel.
just care to give me one or two, that'd be cool.
I'll start with one which is more personal for the Jewish people. There is huge division amongst religious and secular Jews in Israel as to how the society should be structured. Essentially, there's a battle for Israel's soul amongst religious and non-religious Jews.
Okay.
We dreamed of national liberation, we dreamed of establishing a homeland. We brought that into existence, and now we had it. You've got religious Jews and secular Jews fighting for the character of the state. That's a tragedy. So another, to make it more relevant to what I'm sure you want to hear, is Israel-Palestine.
Thank you.
I were talking about the blockade before. While I think Egypt is more at fault, I personally don't think the blockade is helpful.
And so gives people rhetoric to be anti.
And I absolutely understand why it's there. If I've got friends in Sderot and they have rockets raining down on their house, their children have 15 seconds to get to an air raid shelter when that was on. So I understand why that the fence is there, why the blockade is there. I absolutely understand it, and in a way I'm grateful it's there because it kind of brings some peace to Israel. But I think there are more effective ways of managing that border and the relations between those two people. So there's many.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Thank you. Thank you.
The point I was trying to make before you had to go to your rabbi was in the international definition of anti-Semitism, which I think was updated in October 2016. It says that you cannot blame any Jew or Jewish group for any act that is real or not of any terrorism or anything like that. And you cannot blame the Jewish people for it. As in, you cannot say, oh, the Jews are terrorists or whatever.
Yeah, just like you can't say Muslims are paedophiles. That's a good thing.
No, but you have Islamic terrorists and you have...
Yeah. So that's it. You have Islamic terrorists, you have Jewish terrorists.
But you don't call them Islamophobes.
No, listen. Yeah. If I were to say Muslims are terrorists and paedophiles, I would be Islamophobic because the overwhelming majority of Muslims are neither terrorists nor paedophile. If I were to say that Jews were terrorists or paedophiles, that would be anti-Semitic. If I were to say certain Jews or certain Muslims or this theology or this like ideology within Islam or Judaism is problematic, that's fine. It's when you make a blanket statement against the entire people, it becomes a problem.
But then you do that, people do that with everything. I'm not saying it's right, but what I'm saying
Yeah,
is
but
they should make sure that applies to everyone, not just Jews. And then the second one...
It does apply to everyone. I'm sorry, why do people not like Tommy Robinson? Yeah, I'm assuming most people in this circle are not pro-Tommy, because Steve's not here at the moment.
I think he's a bit maligned, but go on.
I don't think he's a racist, but I do think
I don't think he's a racist.
I think he's prejudiced against Muslims.
Just a little bit
I think he's prejudiced against Muslims.
against Muslims.
Exactly. And what does the British press do about that?
He has a right to express his views.
No,
he doesn't get shut down.
Yes, he does. He's the most vilified person in the British
No,
press.
he's vilified, that's fine. But he doesn't get shut down and say, because in international law, if you break...
He's like our Richard Spencer.
Yeah.
If in the international definition, if you break any of these rules, it's technically a crime, right?
Sorry, what rules?
If you break any of the international definition of anti-Semitism.
Do you mean the
15
IRA?
or 15 points, yeah.
So the IRA definition has been accepted by some states, not by others. But a nation has the right to determine what is or isn't anti-Semitic.
Yeah, but it's been adopted here.
Yeah, and what are those clauses? What are those clauses?
There's about 14 of them.
No, but what are they? Yeah, I know them, but what are they?
So for example, to say that the Holocaust doesn't exist or didn't happen or try to misplay or say that certain facts aren't real.
That's just stupid.
Yeah. Then one is...
But that is anti-Semitic behaviour. What happens to someone who does that?
No, that's fine.
You just said a nation, forget Jewish, you just said a nation has got the right to define what constitutes bigotry against
within that
nation.
nation. Yeah, not against that nation, within that nation. So, and Britain has the right to define its own laws in relation to hate speech. Yeah?
I don't disagree with making blanket statements.
You follow my rabbi?
But what I have a problem with...
Had a very nice discussion.
Yeah, he's like a hero. He's a hero. I told him to come here meet you guys.
Yeah, so the point is that one's a crime and one is... So one is a crime and one is not a crime. Because what Tommy Robinson's doing isn't a crime.
It is a crime. So as an example, I think so I'll give you an example. Tommy Robinson I actually think does some incredible good, as an example. He was one of the primary people who exposed the rape gangs in Rotherham, put huge pressure on the government, which is great. But then he'll go too far and he'll say things like no more mosques or call Muslims musrats. And I ask anyone who supports people like Tommy Robinson, I don't think he said that. But what he said, if anyone was to say Jewish rats or black rats, I would we'd be sickened, and so we shouldn't accept that speech with Muslims.
I don't think the rats comment is one he'd stand by. He's
he probably moved beyond that, but he did say that.
Okay, it may have spilled out of his mouth at some
point.
I don't know.
Okay,
he tweeted
a few times.
But I don't think that's not representative of the guy's policy.
So
it isn't.
I think he's moved beyond that, but I would still say...
He moved in with Quilliam, and
and then he rejected Quilliam, and there's some public spats with Majid Nawaz.
And got sacked.
Yeah, but then I think since then they've chatted.
No, Quilliam, I'm good friends with some of the Quilliam guys. Like,
really?
It's
okay, then I got to revise my views.
All I'm saying is, I think Tommy Robinson is vilified, but I think he also says bad things. And if he'd have stopped at this line here, I think most of the United Kingdom and many Muslims would actually be on side with him. Because who are the biggest victims of Islamic extremism? Muslims. It's not Jews, it's not Christians. Like, the millions of people that are slaughtered, certainly hundreds of thousands that are slaughtered, are usually Muslims killed by other Muslims. And so it should be, whenever I'm engaging with someone about Israel, Palestine, or Islamophobia, it's like, look, your country, wherever you're from, Sudan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, it doesn't matter where. The biggest victims of Islamic extremism are other Muslims. And I think if Tommy Robinson got his message right, instead of being vilified by the media and vilified and hated by the Muslims in the UK, he'd actually have mass support from them, but he gets his message wrong.
And the second thing in the international definition that I don't agree with, I don't agree with, is for me to say don't buy Israeli products.
That's not in the no, it's not in the IRA definition. Boycotting isn't in the IRA definition.
Good. It shouldn't be, should it? It's like South Africa and apartheid. I might believe South Africa's apartheid rightly or wrongly, but I should be able to boycott their goods. I'm allowed to believe it and to boycott without being intrinsically racist.
Let's follow up.
That's not the point. That's not the issue. The issue is on what basis am I within my rights to boycott?
So perfect. Let's play this out. Do I have the right? Let's say this lady here is Israeli. Do I have? She comes into my shop. Have I got the right to say, sorry, no, I don't serve you. You're from Israel.
Okay, that's a hard...
No, that's a blockade.
It's a good one to debate. We don't have to make it about Israel and Palestine. You can make it about the gay thing, and people allow gay people into their hotels. If it's a hotel, it's the same debate, isn't it? We're just moving it to a less inflammatory...
I'd say more inflammatory. You'd say less inflammatory. For me, it's more inflammatory because my people are getting killed.
Well, no, I was trying to move it off.
Yeah.
I was just trying to move it to the idea of if it's your business, to what degree can you go against the politically correct culture and assert the boundary?
Absolutely. And so to the gay point, I think is a good point.
So I just shifted to that.
I think it's a good point. And I think most people that are of sound mind, and let's make it even.
All right, insanity is your out.
No, I mean sound like of good, morally think like me, that are correct.
That's good. That's good.
If there used to be signs up in the UK that said like no dogs, no Irish, no blacks.
Yeah, that's
I
not
think
cool.
most of us would say that's a blockade that we don't support.
Agreed.
And I think blockades are bad. Blockades divide people.
Okay.
Now we can get into the ethical argument of is it just, isn't it just? I think there are pros and cons to both sides. I absolutely understand why many Jews feel it is anti-Semitic, because Israel is singled out as the only state when there are regimes around the world that inflict so much more cruelness that Israel could even get in China.
To boycott Israeli goods is anti-Semitic.
Let me finish my point. In China, 1 million Muslims are in concentration camps. 1 million Muslims.
Chance for trial.
Nobody's talking about boycotting China. Why?
No.
Why? Because you can't boycott China, and they don't care about the Muslims.
That's not a reason, but you can't use that to justify...
No, so what I'm saying, you're missing my point. My point is, if you single out Israel and ignore all these other atrocities, then people like me may cynically question why...
Okay,
Cool,
good point.
I
No, fair
understand,
enough.
but to then say we should not do that, because what if I legitimately believe that, okay, the Israeli government is systematically trying to detrify the area and push all the...
We don't have to be hypothetical. The Arabs have been boycotting Israel since its creation, pretty much.
Okay.
There's been... I'm not allowed...
Me as a person that lives in the UK, that would say, okay, cool, you know what, because I don't agree with what the Israeli government is doing, not the Jewish people, but the Israeli government, and these products support the Israeli government, they fund them, I prefer not to buy them.
They don't fund the Israeli government, that's the thing.
Or their
But they pay tax,
taxpayers.
tax
Right?
goes to them, or for whatever reason.
So,
or maybe they directly fund, I don't know, but I'm just saying, for example,
so
if I believe that, is it not my right to choose what I buy and not buy?
You have a right to
then
choose what to...
impose-
So no, absolutely. As an individual,
Yeah.
you have a right to choose what you do. It's when you represent an organisation or an institution it becomes problematic. Harvey, say that again?
You're talking about the people who live in Palestine.
No, we're not. We're not talking about the people who live in Palestine.
Boycotting
We're
Israel.
talking about my Aki
I
here.
have a choice whether to buy Israeli products or not from the
I was
UK.
thinking, people who live in Israel as Palestinians, they don't have
And a
to
lot of
choose
them,
what
they
they
were
want.
supporting
Do you know-
state
do-
that Israel is an apartheid
Especially
state.
people in West Bank, they are very much apart.
In my view,
Military
Israeli website.
Yeah, so Omar, so that's a great example. So the boycott movement, which you're talking about, boycott, divestment and sanction, was started by a guy called Omar
But I'm not
Barghouti.
anti-Semitic.
Omar Barghouti.
What are you on the subject of whether Israel is a...
Yeah, okay, good, I'll see you soon.
Is Israel an apartheid state? What do you think? My gut tells me yes.
Yeah.
But I'm open to be persuaded otherwise, but I feel like it is.
Same.
And I think the evidence seems quite strong.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether Israel is an apartheid state.
I've got to say, my default position is I feel there's a big parallel between South African apartheid and a two-tier system with Israel.
Perfect.
But I want to be able to level that criticism of the state in a way which is not a criticism of people of Jewish genealogy.
Can you give me any examples?
Huh? No,
Can you give
why
me-
is that? I mean, that's fair.
No,
yeah?
no.
That's what you want.
Can you
I
give-
hope you agree with me.
I think it's a great way.
Okay.
Can you give me any examples of Israel's apartheid laws?
Using Wix website.
Because it's a very strong statement you made.
The pass laws not
I
qualified?
mean,
What not
Pass laws or not?
What laws?
yeah, but also confining Gazans into this tiny little
Gazans are
space.
Palestinian citizens. So Gazans live in Gaza, which is a future Palestinian state.
So
Gazans
it's not,
don't live in
it's not
Israel.
a state now.
They haven't declared independence.
Well, I mean, since Gaza, Palestine was supposed to be declared a state for the last 60 years.
They haven't.
I know it never happened. The infrastructure never happened, and my guess is the state of Israel hasn't historically been keen on sanctioning that either. Has it?
So Israel has sat down and offered the Palestinians 97% of the land that they want, billions in compensation for the refugees that can't aren't we?
90%. Okay,
97%.
can we be honest about Israel for a minute? Most of the land, it's not about the numbers game. It's about the key bits of land, isn't it?
Yes. So
a
the
lot
West
of it's
Bank
just
is
desert.
The West Bank is the most fertile. The Jews were given the desert, which is the Negev desert, which makes up 70% of Israel, which is completely barren.
That's right.
So the argument goes against what you're saying.
Never been to
But
the
come
Negev desert, it's barren.
come back to
There's also
apartheid.
an issue with Gazans
It's hundreds of
and
miles
their
of barren
water
land.
systems
I've driven
and
it,
how
I've driven
that's
through it.
being
So it's a
contaminated.
great example. So Israel is basically
like
at
Arizona.
war with Hamas.
It looks like Arizona.
Well done, mate. I like your afro. I don't like what's coming out your mouth, though.
What did you say?
Israel
doesn't exist. It did when I saw it this morning, anyway.
Israel doesn't
It did when I flew there a few weeks ago. It was actually there. Yes, but
I like your hair. I just don't like what you're saying.
I like your beard, Ginger.
Does hair never?
what is this? What is this? A fashion show? What's going on here?
So to come back to the water, which is a great example.
Yeah.
So Israel has been at war with Hamas since Hamas's inception.
So
Hamas can just to
are
make
we
my point.
differentiating between Hamas and Gaza now?
So
or
yes.
is that
So
just one and the
that's what I'm trying to get to. Hamas control Gaza. They like the controlling. They drove Fatah, who was the opposition party, out. They dropped them from buildings on under their heads. They killed the opposition. The opposition fled back to the West Bank, and in the West Bank is controlled by Fatah, or the Palestinian Authority. Israel has an agreement with the Palestinian Authority that it will supply. So you've got to understand, Israel's at war with these entities. It will supply utilities, gas, water, electricity to the Palestinians, a people it's at war with. The Palestinian Authority then pay the bill. So if you go to Gaza and you speak to a Gaza, who do you think the people in Gaza hate the most? You might think the Jews, you might think the Israelis. It's not.
You're gonna say
It's the
Hamas.
Palestinian. No, it's not. It's not even Hamas. That's changing. There's public uprising at the moment, but the people the Gazans hate the most is the Palestinian Authority. Because why? They live in huge palatial villas in the West Bank. Yeah, like you got no idea. When I go there, I see more Range Rovers in Ramallah than I see in Hampstead. Like there is a lot of money in the West Bank, and it doesn't make it to the so the Hamas have no money. Qatar gives them a little bit, but the real money's with the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority pay the electricity, the water, the utilities bill to Israel. And the Palestinian Authority deliberately don't pay that bill. They deliberately don't pay that bill. And as a consequence, then the water gets cut off, then the electricity gets cut off, which Israel's giving or selling to its neighbours.
Why
Could you imagine?
Why do they deliberately not pay it?
And they deliberately don't pay it because Hamas and the Palestinian Authority despise each other. Palestinian Authority wants to destabilise Gaza so they can take power again. So in Gaza, if you speak to Gazans, they hate the Palestinian Authority. They hate the Israelis. They hate Hamas.
You had two parties, and that's what the South Africans
We-
were saying. Oh, they're fighting each other.
But anyways,
Okay, anyway, your question. I don't know whose question it was.
it's a very short question.
Hamas and Fatah.
I just want to
absolutely
know,
factual.
don't take me as racist or anything, but I want to say something really
But some of your best friends are black.
Sorry. So the question that I want to ask is that since when did the Middle East belong to Caucasian people with ginger beards? Because last time I checked, no. The last time I checked, there were brown people with Afro hair, right? All brown people, Arabs.
When did you last check?
Mate, why don't you direct the question at me? I don't control the Middle East.
Yeah, but
despite how I look.
No.
So hear me out. Half of my family are Irish. Yeah, half of my family are Jewish. The
best half, yeah.
Yeah, definitely the Irish side. I'm the only Jew that can hold my drink.
So you're Irish and Jewish.
I'm Irish and Jewish.
Your dad is Irish or your mom?
It's inconsequential to the
you
debate.
have to, because you have to lineage.
No, it's
In Judaism, lineage is really important.
Yeah, the only
and we
reason-
come back to our father as well.
Yeah, you're right. Judaism doesn't come through the father; it comes through the mother.
Who was the Jew?
Can I just?
Who was the Jew?
There's conversions in my family, and I don't really want to go into my family's personal story. Okay, so that's fine.
But I just want to know who was the Jew? Who was the Jew?
Okay, can I just answer your actual question?
Yeah.
Which
Well, you
is
say you're Irish and Jewish. I want to know which part of you
I'll
Jewish.
follow your lead.
Doesn't matter. It's
Your
none
mum-
of your business.
If your mum is a Jewish, then you can't.
It's none of your business, basically.
For example, you can't claim.
Can I answer your actual question? You asked me about the government.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Likewise.
You're an Irish.
Are you also going? It's really nice
So
chatting.
basically, you're Irish.
No. Okay, so Judaism is an ethnicity and a religion, yes?
So are you a religious?
I'm religious. I'm an Orthodox Jew, religiously.
Okay, religiously.
Yeah. So can I come back?
But not ethnically.
Can I come back? No, my DNA goes all the way back to Israel. I've got DNA because I've done a DNA study.
No, maybe you don't, but who's
Do you know
your
where the
dad
West
did?
Bank is?
So on both sides, there's DNA that goes
Do you know
back
what
to
West Bank
Israel.
is?
Both sides.
West Bank is the next.
I'd rather not. It's none of your business. So you can move on from this, or we can just keep on going. I'm just going to keep on. Okay, I'm going to talk to someone else. I'm going to talk to someone else. You either.
I'm asking you a
and
very
I'm telling you,
clear-cut question.
and I'm telling you, it's
I'm
none
an
of your
African
business.
and I'm Somali.
And I'm telling you,
and I can tell you I'm Somali. I can give you my DNA.
And I'm giving you.
I can give you my.
Right, it's nice chatting. It's nice chatting. It's nice chatting.
Israel.
It's nice chatting.
Okay. Jesus is a Jew, right?
Jesus
was a Jew.
Well, Jews don't really follow Jesus.
But he was a Jew.
They say he was a
According
Jew.
to history, yeah. And as we know, Jesus was not.
To Margaret Thatcher.
How do you know that? How do you know what Jesus looked like?
What do you mean?
How do you know what Jesus looked like?
At that time, Jesus.
No. How do you know what Jesus looked like? Have you seen a picture?
Have I seen a picture?
Yeah.
Well, there are very.
Who are the people? No, stop.
Listen.
Who are the
Ask me a
people?
question.
Who were the people that controlled
You asked me
Israel?
a question.
Who were the people that controlled Israel at the time of Rome? Where were Romans from?
The white people.
Who was there before that? Greeks.
Italy, yeah?
Greeks.
Yeah.
This is what I
No, Mediterranean people. The people of Lebanon, yeah? Do they look like you?
want.
Do the people of Syria look like you?
Well,
No.
so we go
Do the
back to
people of
history,
Jordan? No. Do the people of Jordan look like you?
Let's go back to specific parts of the history.
No.
So we go back to
You're running around. I'm asking you, where is your proof that Jesus was black?
Okay. There are a lot of historical artifacts.
There's no historical artifact to do with Jesus being black.
He was a dark-skinned lad, man.
Show me one archaeological piece of evidence that Jesus was black.
He's an Aramaic Jew.
He was Jewish. We know. They say he was Jewish. We got no evidence of what his skin colour was. He could be pink for all you
I want to
know.
hear him out. So can I reply when? Right.
And so therefore you have to get to a position where you say, right.
I'm going to get involved in that debate though.
But-
I mean,
yeah,
you
but
killed the debate. You killed the debate,
I didn't
bro.
kill it. No, come back. Okay, let's come back to. You see, I'm going to show you. This is an ancient art, right?
How ancient?
Here it is. One second.
It's at least 700 years, if not 1,000 years, after Jesus.
This is not actually. You're right.
And it was from, where was it from? Ethiopia. Yeah. So that's not evidence.
But at the same time, Ethiopians.
What colour are Ethiopians?
They're black people.
So what colour are Romans?
Romans are white people.
What colour do Romans paint Jesus?
White.
What colour do Ethiopians paint Jesus? So how do you know who's true?
You're right. Now come back to your point, because I was asking you a question, so I want to know how you are connected to Israel.
So and I told you, genetically and religiously.
Genetically. So I want you to
So
tell
I'll give
me
you
how.
my haplotype. My haplotype is E1B1B. So do you know what a haplotype is?
Yeah, but
No, do you know what a haplotype is?
yeah. Somalis fall under the E1B1 as well.
So exactly. So I, looking like this, have the same genetic makeup as you. How is that possible?
I don't know. That's something you need to figure out. But what I'm trying to use, that's this, yeah? In Palestine, right? Because listen, in Palestine we have a lot of Arabs there.
Yeah.
It's a Arab land.
Yeah.
And as we know, Arab people are brown.
Yeah.
They're not Caucasian. They're not ginger.
Palestinians
right?
don't look like you, bro. Let me show you a video. Do you know who TRT is?
Obviously, they don't. I'm not saying Palestinians
No.
look like me. I said when I say brown, I'm not talking about
No,
dark skin.
they look more like me. Look at this. I'm going to show you something. TRT.
Bro, as we know that there was a lot of mixture when Islam expanded, especially the.
Look at this. We're going to watch a video.
Have you heard? Do you know the Islamic expansion?
Do I know?
The Islamic expansion.
Of course, we call it the
obviously.
Islamic conquest.
Or conquest, expansion, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I call it expansion
Yeah.
personally, right? Because they expanded it.
No, in many cases it was an expansion.
Anyways, let's say it was expansion, yeah? For the sake of the argument. Now, when the Muslims went very far into the world.
EC3?
You're a good fighter, man.
Moderator. The man of peace.
Listen. Basically, the Muslim people, they have expanded to the world and they interact with a lot of outsiders like Westerners. For example, Spanish people. There's a lot of Muslims in Spain.
Yep.
And obviously there's a lot of Spanish that converted to Islam and they came to Arabian worlds and so on and so forth. There's a lot of intermixture. So that would make sense that, these Arabs of Middle East, most of them mixed. The closer you are to the Mediterranean, the more you look like the so-called Westerners, you hear me? So long story short, what I'm telling you is that I want to know how a place that was known as Palestine.
When was it known as Palestine?
It was always known as Palestine.
Do you know why? Do you know where Palestine the word comes from?
Okay, where does it come from?
It comes from the word Palishtim in Hebrew. It comes from the Bible. Do you know what Palishtim means? invaders. Do you know why the Palestinian or the Palestinians were called invaders? Because they were Greek people that came across the Aegean Sea. They settled in a small area near Ashkelon, Ashdod in Gaza city, and they established a small kingdom there. They were Greeks, and the Israelites were at war with the Palestinians. Then what happened? Fast forward a few thousand years. This was biblical times. I think this will have been around. You'll have to check. But I think around 2,800 years. I think.
You think? So you're not sure?
They can check, but people can check. I'm coming with a lot more facts than you, bro.
That's true.
And so then the Romans, around 2,000 years ago, defeated a Jewish uprising in Israel, and to humiliate the Jews, they renamed a region which stretched from Egypt all the way up to Turkey, and they renamed that area to humiliate the Jews Syria Palestina. Why did they call it Syria Palestina? They called it Palestina to humiliate the Jews because the Palestinians were the historical enemies of the Jewish people in the Torah. It's got nothing to do with the modern Palestinian people.
So who was the when Joshua was
Canaanites?
Yeah, so they were going to the promised land to finish off the journey of Moses. So basically, they were taking over. What was the city called at that time?
Jericho. Those are different cities there. Jericho.
Was it Jericho specifically?
It was one of the cities. Jerusalem was later. King David made Jerusalem really.
But Jericho is a modern day name in the Bible. It's English name.
Jericho is the Hebrew name.
Jericho.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, all right. Cool.
Aki, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to get involved.
Me, like, I'm not very well versed because I'm always trying to understand this, like the tension between Israel and Palestine.
There shouldn't be tension. We're cousins. Despite you saying I'm the wrong colour, we're actually cousins. We believe basically the same thing. We've lived in peace most of our lives. We can live in peace again. We just have to listen to what the other side is saying. Since we listen, we can find peace. If I understand what you want from me and you understand what I want from you, we can find a compromise.
Why do you believe in Zionism and that?
I'm the biggest Zionist you'll meet.
Oh wow! So you guys been killing a lot of Palestinians though.
What's a Zionist?
Huh?
What is a Zionist?
I don't know. Some people were trying to take over the world. Conspiracy theory.
Exactly. So you don't know what a Zionist is, yet you got nervous when I said I was one.
Yeah. Obviously, I got really nervous. I got really scared.
Yeah, because we're going to cut off your bank account.
Oh wow! That's you know what I mean. But tell me, who are the Zionists?
So a Zionist is basically anyone that supports the state of Israel. You can support a Palestinian state as well and still be a Zionist.
Okay, but there's no Palestinian state anymore.
There's never been one, but there could be one, but there isn't one.
But there used to be one.
When? Who was its ruler?
Well, there were, before Palestine, they had presidents, right?
No.
Actually, this whole thing collapsed. Wait. This whole thing collapsed around the 1940s. That's when the whole historical thing changed, and you guys came through.
So you had the British Mandate of Palestine, which was a protectorate of the, or it was Mandate of the United Kingdom. It was given to them by the League of Nations.
So when did this division start? I want to know when this division started.
The division started in 1947. The United Nations proposed splitting the land into two states. There had been previous proposals to split the land into two states. There has never ever been a nation called Palestine. There's never been a Palestinian president or prime minister. Does that mean you could say that Abu Mazen is today? You could say that Yasser Arafat is a modern leader of the Palestinian people, but there has never been an entity, a sovereign state called Palestine before Israel, before the British Mandate of Palestine. What the region was called was just it was part of the Ottoman Empire. So it was a caliphate. It was part of the caliphate, and you didn't have countries within the caliphate.
So basically, it was Islamic. It was Islamic world.
It was Islamic world.
It was Islamic land before the Jewish got there. Was Islamic land.
And we were the first people to liberate ourselves from Islamic dominance.
From a land which you don't own.
No, we didn't. We lived there.
Yeah, but you just lived there. I live, for example.
It was only your land because you conquered it. Why was it Islamic land?
Who is the majority?
They conquered it from the Christians.
Who was the majority of Palestine?
After the Muslim conquest, it was Muslims. Before the Muslim conquest, it was Christians. Before the Christian conquest, it was the pagans. Before the pagans, it was Jews.
Oh, wait, before the Christians, at the Christian times, yeah? There was no, basically, it was just Palestinians who happened to be Christian.
No, it wasn't. So again,
it was just Arabs who were Christians.
No, it was like Greeks and so like Your history is. You need to read more, basically.
Yeah, I know, but you're right. I'm not very well versed in this Arabic history or the Middle East side of history.
Yeah.
I mostly look into Somali, East African
So
history.
you know your own histories.
Yeah.
What did your ancestors worship before they became Muslim?
We worshipped idols and that.
Which idol?
Basically, we had Waq, we had.
Does that just mean
Ayale.
one god?
No, there's many gods, but basically.
Can I just shake your hand? You're the first Somali I've spoke to that can actually name their ancestral religions.
Yeah. When it comes to East Africa, I can tell you everything about it, but I don't put so much.
Can I ask you a
emphasis.
question?
Yeah.
Like, you've taken on Islam. You wouldn't consider yourself Arab, no? No, you're Somali.
But Islam is not Arab and Islam.
No. Because like, if you look in Sudan, it's a very different story. There's the Arabization in Sudan is like they're fighting over the identity. Are we Sudanese or are we Arabs? And
basically, the majority of the Sudanese will tell you they're not Arab. It just so happens that they speak Arabic. Even their accent or their lahja, it's a different kind of Arabic. It's not the Arabic that we know.
Yeah.
You know, they form their own accents, or what should I say, dialects. You get me? But coming back to Somali, basically I'm a Muslim, but I believe that Islam does not change your culture. Basically,
it does change your culture.
Let me tell you something.
There's nothing wrong with that, but it does.
Wait. There is Arab culture, there is Somali culture, there is African culture, and all these cultures around the world. What Islam does, for example, before Islam got to Arabia, the Arabs had these crazy cultures, right? But long story short, what happened to them is that Islam has filtered their culture, taken out the bad parts, right, and kept the good parts, whereby don't bury or kill your babies and
I'll give
all
you
this
an
stuff.
example of Islamic culture. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but examples of where Islamic culture,
it's not Islamic culture.
or Arabic culture, call it what you want, which is prevalent in Somalia. The hijab.
Okay.
Women before Islam didn't wear the hijab in Somalia.
That's a good question. Yeah.
The laws of how women and men interact in public and in private has massively changed. Now, a fundamental, foundational aspect of any society is how the genders interact. So we have, in the West, it's very laissez-faire. Men and women interact freely, they do what they want, premarital relations, there's no problems. Somalia is much closer to Arabia because they follow the same deity, they follow the Sharia of Islam. And so...
We're not close to Arabia because we follow Islam.
No, you're close to Arabia because you follow a religion that originated in Arabia.
Oh, you're talking about by culture.
Islam is an Arabian religion.
All right.
So
let me correct you there.
Muhammad
let me correct
was
you
an
there.
Arab.
Let me correct you there. You see, before Arabs came to us, right?
Yeah.
We had our own morals and our own laws and everything.
Yeah.
Right. For example, Somalis, the way we marry.
Yeah.
The way, for example, when we want to go, for example, I want to get a girl from a certain family.
Yeah.
The culture that we follow to get the girl and all this stuff is all Somali culture that's been passed down to generation. Now, there's no part in this that Arab has been influenced.
Yeah.
The only part that's Arabic about Somali culture, right?
Prayer time.
The only thing about what's it called? It's Arab in Somali culture. Number one is just like reading the Quran in Arabic and praying in Arabic and saying salam in Arabic. That's it.
And I tell you, it's the entire culture, but there's nothing wrong with that. You love Islam, yeah? Somali?
I'm Somali.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Islamic influence in
But
Somali
I'll
culture.
get back to you next Sunday. I'm
Yeah.
going to do research on this Palestine thing, and I'll come back to you.
Inshallah, I'll have answers.
All right, bro.
Content over everything from your
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen.
Am I telling a story? Oh, no, I'm not a historian. We're debating about women's intellectual ability in Islam.
Tell it to them. Do you want to summarize it, or shall I summarize it?
I think you should summarize it. You're good at summing things
We're
up.
debating that in the Hadith there is a section of text which I think is 241. The number is 241, and I think there's another section which says